Welcome, everyone. Welcome, neighbors. If you are interested in let me begin at the beginning. I will call to order the Planning Commission meeting for Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. How can we be in 2026? At 6 p.m. This meeting may also be viewed on Channel 20 and is available on live streaming on the city's website and on www.slow-span.org. That is about 45 seconds to a minute behind what's happening in the room, just so you're aware if you're at home. Members of the public may provide public comment during the meeting by calling 805-321-6639. The phone line is now open, and that is live. I will invite you all to stand as you are able for the pledge. Commissioner Holden?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Ratana, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Holden?
Here.
Vice Chair Swift?
Here.
And Chair Mann?
Here.
And please let the record show that Commissioner Halverson is not present.
Great. And if you are here to give public comment, it is helpful to us to have speaker slips. Those are at the back, and you can give them to Clerk Ratana. So the first item on the agenda is the appointment of the Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair. As it is only 3 of us, the numbers are small. So I do want to at first gauge interest in who is willing to serve in this capacity. Commissioner Holden, do you have any interest in serving as chair or vice chair?
My commission is up in May, so probably not.
Okay, so that leaves it to us. Vice Chair Swift, we can continue in this configuration?
Status quo seems pretty reasonable.
Okay, so I think I do need to receive a nomination for chair first, and then we'll take a vote, and then a nomination for vice chair.
So I'll nominate you for chair.
Can we do a voice vote for this one?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of Rachel Mann continuing as chair of the Planning Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And I will nominate Vice Chair Swift to continue in the vice chair role. Seeing no one decline that, let's do a voice vote for that. All in favor of Vice Chair Swift continuing in the vice chair role, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much. So we're staying in our same places. Do we need to call the roll again?
I don't think so.
I think we can skip that part of this script that I have. At this time, the new Planning Commission chair will conduct the meeting. That would be me. All right. At this time, the Planning Commission will review the order of business to be conducted and receive requests for or make announcements regarding any changes in the order of the day. The Commission should, by motion, adopt the agenda as presented or as revised. Are there any suggested changes to the agenda? Commissioner Holden?
No.
Chair Swift? Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. We will have 3 opportunities for public comment today. The first is for items that are not on the agenda. We have to do the consent agenda first. But I will state at this time, please call in at 805-321-6639 if you would like to provide any public comment. During this time, the Commission will allow public communication. Sorry? Are we good? Public communication, any member of the public may address the Commission for a period not to exceed 3 minutes total on any item of interest not on the agenda and within the jurisdiction of this Commission. The Commission will listen to all communications. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the Commission cannot act on items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wanted to speak at this point in the public communication? I have general public communication, Randy Pfizer.
Hi, Randy Pfizer, 340 Front Street, and that's the stuff going on down there is what I'm going to talk about. On heights of buildings, again, I think we need to really revisit that in whatever way we can. I know it's on the agenda for the City Council next time, but just want to keep that in the public eye, how important it is to many of us about the height of the buildings and parking and many other things. But I wanted to give a little background too. My dad built this building, the masonry on it, and the police station. And Whitey Pfizer was his name. And he was a member of the community here since 1959. When I came, I was 7. He was on the planning commission for several years. He was chairman for at least 1 year, somewhere back in the early mid 50s. But he was more apt to doing things for the city. And the original Grover City Welcomes You sign on 4th Street, and the one by what is the train station now, he did with volunteer help, including me every time. We did the stonework on the Youth Foundation. Anybody know what the Youth Foundation is now? It was supposed to be for Youth Forever. It's the community center down on Trouville. That used to be called the Grover City Youth Foundation. And a lot of people donated time and money, and my dad did the stone on that. We did the barbecue pit in the back, many things like that, donations. So I have a lot of knowledge about the last 60 plus years of this community, and I did the brick columns up at the Grover Heights Park a few years ago, about 10 or 15 years ago, geez. So just want to let you know my credentials, and no high buildings, please.
Thank you. I also have for general public comment, Kelvin Kovdick.
Good evening. At the pre-application hearing for 359 Front Street on December 2nd, 2025, the public was asked to focus on the design of the new buildings. Okay, well, this is a problem because if someone challenges that project, they're limited to what was said in the meeting. It's right in this little blue slip that we get, and I'll just read it. If you challenge the nature of the proposed actions in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearings described in this notice. The person sitting next to me, or 2 spaces away from me, said, well, I have nothing to say now. I don't want to talk about the design. So whatever that person, and they're not here tonight, whatever they were going to say was not said, and if it was important, then it can't even bring up an illegal challenge. So I propose that we have that pre-application hearing again and just say that all things can be addressed. Now, I realize, because I watched it over again in the video that was online, and it was just suggested. But that person sitting a couple of spaces away from me took that suggestion and was silent. So I think, in all fairness, we should reschedule that for a future date. We have time. Okay, since we're talking about 359 Front Street, or I am, I want to address the spacing. It's as it sits now on the design, it's 15 feet. Just north on the same property, they have 35 foot spacing. Ironically, that's owned by Mr. Ford, who owns the property now. So, and the height of those buildings are 33 feet. Randy was talking about that. He went to Cal Poly and studied architecture, and he's mentioned in other meetings that you have to do scale. So scale is 33 feet right across the board, and not with all the extra staircases. I talked to a construction worker this week, and I said, how tall is that building on Front Street, the current one, Trinity? On paper, it says 39 feet. He goes, oh, it's over 50 feet, 50 plus. I go, okay, well, that's because of the stairways and whatever else they got up there. So when you look on the paper and it says 40 feet, it's not 40 feet, it's 55, 60. So hope we can reschedule that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kovnick. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak for public communication at the beginning? I see Ms. Peterson.
Thank you, Council, or Planning Commission, sorry about that. I know that I heard when the roll call was called that there was one person who wasn't here, but it looks to me like there are two, so the roll call may be inaccurate. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what was mentioned by Mr. Kovduk, that about the public being admonished to speak to the design of the project on Front Street. The problem with that is that it is definitely a violation of the First Amendment rights of both the federal and state constitutions, and I think also it's going to be would be considered a violation of the Brown Act, open and transparent government. And the problem with that is that it seems to be becoming practice and pattern here. Because on September 2nd, the phones didn't work. There were people who couldn't call in with their opinions, and the Planning Commission refused to hear that one as well. So this is the second one. The only way I know if the Commission refuses to rehear is to submit it to the District Attorney's Public Corruption Unit. And I'd hate to see us have to do that just for the sake of having open and transparent government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who wanted to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing no hands, is there anyone on the line who wants to speak to an item that's not on the agenda?
Yes, we have Brenda Auer.
We're here.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Council, thank you very much, Randy and your family, for all you've done. Thank you, Calvin and Debbie, for speaking up. I agree that Front Street should be revisited and brought back to the people. I do pray tonight that you listen to the people. I represent more than 100 buyers and sellers which have bought property here in Grover Beach. Some of them don't have a voice. Some of them don't understand. Some of them have been threatened or are afraid if they want to build on their property, they'll suffer from it. Please listen to everyone, and please, I'm asking you, it's coming back to you with the council to talk about the height restrictions that were changed during COVID while people were actually trying to survive their life. You were there, I was there, we all know what it felt like. We weren't paying attention to what was being changed on Zoom. Please think about that as you get told about RHNA numbers, which we've done well with. The only thing Grover Beach is actually lacking is affordable housing. We got our high end, we got the housing, although nobody lives there. Drive down 4th Street on the weekend, see how many parking spots are taken. Man, in my opinion, a hotel would have been much better profit. I pray for you all that you make right decisions for the people and their best as well as yours, being a resident. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Auer. Is there anyone else on the line who wanted to call in?
No, there's not.
Okay. I will close public comment. Sorry, I didn't open it with my gavel, but I'll close it with the gavel. Thank you very much, everyone who spoke. We'll now have a look at the consent agenda, which includes just the minutes from the previous meeting in December. But I will open public comment for that. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the commission on the item listed under the consent agenda? Let me open public comment. Is there anyone in the room who wanted to comment on the minutes? And is there anyone on the phone?
No, there's not.
I will close public comment for the item on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
And do I have a second?
I will second her motion.
And this can be a voice vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. We go now to our public hearing item number 2. As a reminder, if you would like to call in for public comment on an item, please call in at 805-321-6639. Item 2 is Development Application DA 25-0028. The applicant is Anytime Fitness and Dan Sussman, and we will hear a presentation from Senior Planner Bill.
Thank you, and good evening. Tonight we'll be reviewing a request for a use permit to allow a 24-hour health and fitness facility within an existing commercial space located at 1400 West Grand Avenue in Suite F. The project site is located within an existing commercial shopping center along the intersection of West Grand Avenue and South 14th Street. The 6,000 square foot commercial suite is located in the retail commercial zone, and the space is currently vacant and was previously occupied by a medical office use. The surrounding land uses include general retail to the north, the Grover Gardens Mobile Home Park to the west, multifamily housing to the south, and the Grover Plaza Shopping Center to the east. The applicant, Anytime Fitness, is requesting approval of the use permit to establish and operate a 24-hour health and fitness facility within the existing commercial suite. Improvements would be limited to the fitness areas, restrooms, and accessory spaces, typical of a neighborhood-serving fitness facility. There are no exterior building modifications proposed as part of this project. The proposed project is consistent with the goals and policies of the general plan, particularly those related to commercial activity within the retail and commercial services land use designation. And the proposed project is consistent with the intent of the retail commercial zone as it maintains an existing commercial use in an area intended for auto-centric commercial community activities. The change of use does not introduce any incompatible activity, expand the building footprint, or intensify development beyond that of what was envisioned in the zone. As conditioned, the proposed use complies with all applicable development standards. The project does not propose any outdoor classes or recreational uses. All required findings have been included in the resolution to support the approval of a health fitness facility at this location. The project is also categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act. The required findings for the exemption have also been included in the resolution. And staff has evaluated the project's consistency with relevant requirements and found it to be consistent with the current standards. Therefore, we're recommending approval of the use permit tonight, subject to the required findings and conditions of approval. And that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners have any questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Holden?
No.
Vice Chair Swift?
I do. So the parking that wraps around that whole building is used by the auto parts store, the market, and then this facility, and those are the three users in that complex, or is there a fourth?
The fourth suite is currently vacant. I believe they're looking at a new use going in there, but we haven't received an application at this time. The applicant might be able to speak more to that, as I believe they're more aware of the details of the new tenant space. But parking would be evaluated. I believe I've provided a table in the staff report that outlined the parking requirements for the vacant suite, which I think is Suite D. And so if the new use has more intensive parking requirement than what was projected for, then we'll have to figure out a solution to identify if there's any parking alternatives that could be considered for the new use as it goes in.
Okay. And then the internal modifications to the building, those are all over-the-counter permits?
Not necessarily over the counter, but yes, it would be reviewed by our building consultants for consistency with all the 2025 California building codes.
And if the applicant is here, I'm just curious how that went with them. I know some businesses have trouble bringing up things to code when they start making minor changes for the use, and it sort of snowballs on them. That didn't happen here.
Yeah, they haven't submitted the tenant improvements yet. This is the first step of the process to
Okay.
receive the use permit, so they can have assurance to move forward with the actual structural changes, or if any. However, this building was built in the 1990s, and so they have a leg up in making improvements that are more consistent with current standards than some of our older buildings and infrastructure throughout the city. So that is probably some good news for the tenant, but we'll have to evaluate that when we get to the building permit phase.
But nothing that jumps out at you that it's going to cause them grief. I mean, there's no red flags at this point.
Nothing that we've seen so far.
Okay, thank you.
I did have a question. So is there currently a bathroom in that space?
Yes, but I believe it's going to be retrofitted. I think I have a tenant improvement slide up here. Here we go. The back top right corner, you can see some bathroom facilities, and I believe they have some,
It looked like 2 showers.
yeah, some showers as well.
So in terms of water usage, is there anything in our code that would, we would want to make a consideration for if they're increasing the expected water usage?
Yeah, that is something we evaluate during the building permit process, but the likelihood of additional showers in this capacity.
So under California Building Code standards, they'll be required to comply with commercial water fixture flows, et cetera. So we also have our building official, Mark Sadowski, present this evening if you would like additional information on that, but likely the fixtures themselves will be low flow, consistent with building code standards, and any and all pressure requirements are going to be met and evaluated during the building permit stage.
Okay, so it's possible that that even with more fixtures, it could have similar water usage if the previous.
Correct,
Had
and we
been
currently do
not
not
been
have
low
any.
flow.
Yeah, and we currently don't have any local standards that limit water usage within commercial buildings. But the requirements under building code are already fairly, restrictive and standard to ensure maximum water conservation efforts. That I don't have any concerns. But again, I would look to Mark if there's anything additional that you'd like to add to those statements.
Okay, thank you. And it will be reviewed during the next stage, it sounds like. So I have no further questions for staff. I will go ahead and open public comment for item 2. And first, I'd like to invite, the public hearing is now open. I'd like to invite the applicant to speak.
Good evening, Jeff Baggy with Pegasus Architecture, 569 Higuera. Not much to add, it's a pretty simple project. There were existing bathrooms in there that had higher flow fixtures. We're going to be restricting the fixtures, so it'll probably be pretty close to a match. And other than that, it's a pretty simple project. It's pretty straightforward, everything's listed. Parking's pretty much a straight swap. And I'm here for questions if you have any.
Great, thank you. I think I go on to anyone else in the room, and then if we have questions.
Yes,
If commission has questions for the applicant, then we'll do that at the end of the.
you can do it either way.
Is there anyone, I don't have any slips for anyone speaking in the room. Is there anyone in the room who wanted to speak on item 2? I'm not seeing anyone. Is there anyone on the phone that wanted to speak on item 2?
No, there's not.
Okay, well then I'll just go ahead and close the public hearing, and if we need to reopen it for the applicant to speak, or do I leave it open? I'm sorry.
I recommend asking your fellow commissioners if they have any questions for the applicant while the public hearing's open, and
Okay.
if they don't, then close the public hearing.
All right, let's do that. Commissioner Holden,
I have no questions.
Vice Chair Swift,
I have no questions.
and I have no more questions for the applicant. So I will close the public hearing. There we go. Okay. Commissioners, do we have any questions for each other? Commissioner Holden?
I don't.
Vice Chair Swift?
No.
And I don't have any questions for either of you for discussion. So I will invite a motion for item 2.
I move that we adopt the resolution approving the use permit to establish a 24-hour fitness facility within an existing commercial suite as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
This is a roll call vote. Clerk Ratana, would you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Swift,
Yes.
Commissioner Holden,
Yes.
and Chairman.
Yes. The motion passes. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3, which is a business item. And this is opportunity for the Planning Commission to discuss emerging policy topics with Community Development Director Martin. And the title, which I shall read. Oh, sorry, is that? There's not really a title for the item apart from that, is there? Since it's not an application. So I will invite the Community Development Director, Ms. Martin, to present.
Thank you. So the item before you this evening is we've titled as Emerging Planning Commission Topics. During the 2025 calendar year, there were several evenings on regularly scheduled agendas in which your commission had questions and or wanted to discuss additional topics that were not agendized on that specific agenda hearing. Oops, sorry, is it? Beeping at me. So I'll just continue as we continue to have technical difficulties. So one of the solutions that the commission as well as staff kind of collaborated on was, well, how do we bring this back forward to offer your commission the platform to have thoughtful discussions on those emerging topics, identify questions, and maybe even find consensus to forward some of those questions as well as policy, recommendations to the council for them to consider moving forward on. And so that's really the purpose of this evening's item, is to provide your commission with a platform to discuss those emerging topics that came up in 2025 amongst yourselves, ask questions of staff, provide it as an open forum for the public to provide additional comment, and then based on that, ask staff on your behalf to forward those to the council. And this is also timely because some of these items are related to housing and development within our community, and the council's agendized the housing and development discussion from March 31st, 2026. Are we live? Are we good? Okay, thank you. Again, purpose for this evening is, again, facilitate discussion and open forum for you, the commissioners. This is your item. Discuss the emerging topics that you identified, share your ideas, elaborate on, the objectives of the topic as it was brought up, identify any questions. Staff will be available to answer. And as I mentioned, we've also been joined this evening by our building official, Mr. Mark Sadowski, for one of the topics, but he could be available for any additional questions that might spur from conversations. And then lastly, just to find consensus to potentially forward for some of these topics, recommendations to the council for consideration. So when the presentation's done, I'll bring this slide back up, but the emerging policy topics that we identified included single stairwell reform, height limits for accessory dwelling units, parking regulations for both ADUs as well as unique land uses. And what I mean by unique land uses, we had 2 items back to back at your commission this year. One was for an indoor batting cage, and a second unique land use was an arcade. And there were questions around parking and how we identify whether there would be sufficient parking for those unique land uses if they weren't identified within our development code. There were also some questions regarding regulations and policies, specifically around safety for e-bikes. Most recently, the last 3 items, the commission as well as staff have heard from the community, as well as from your commission, how do we find that Grover Beach character? So the question of further discussion on the efficacy of our objective design standards is included. Again, recent project approvals involved mixed-use projects and development, and so allowing the platform to ask questions about mixed-use development and any additional advice or direction that we can give. Happy to provide that this evening. And then lastly, there have been a lot of questions recently on visual resource impacts in the coastal zone. So that was a little bit of a last-minute addition, but it was really to provide, as part of the report, clarification to your commission on how projects are analyzed against our certified local coastal program as it relates to visual impacts. So with that, I'll dive into our first topic, so single stairwell
Can I just
reform.
ask a quick question?
Of course.
So can you go back to your bulletized list?
Yes.
Is that list of bullets considered the agendized topics? And we can't stray outside of those? Or do we have some leeway to explore beyond that?
I wouldn't recommend going beyond this, although the agenda title is rather broad. I mean, this document that includes these listed topics was included in the agenda packet, so this is what the public was noticed that will be discussed.
If I deviate too far, you'll let me know, right?
Of course.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Great question, though. So the first topic, single stairwell reform. So this was one of the first topics that kind of came out of 2025, and it's exactly what it sounds like. So a single stairwell instead of potentially two stairwells within a multi-story apartment or condominium complex. Proponents of the idea believe that the design change does enable property owners to make better use of smaller and very constrained or irregular lot sizes. Most importantly, it increases usable floor area and to allow additional unit counts to a development or increase the floor area so that those proposed units can be larger. Opponents generally share the same concerns over fire and safety. Specifically, two exits provide redundant exit strategies, especially for those that are mobility impaired, for seniors, and for families. One exit could create a bottleneck in which the safety features of the two versus the one. There's just some limitations there if there's smoke inhalation, et cetera. If it's in regards to, for example, a catastrophic fire, which is why the two stairwells within a multi-story complex exist in the first place. It really was born from catastrophic fires within apartment buildings. So I've invited our building official to tonight's meeting in the event your commission has questions on the item following staff's presentation. We did explore this as an option to present to the council as part of the 2025 Building Code update. However, Assembly Bill, or AB 130, really limited and paused new local amendments on residential code. And it really wasn't clear to us whether that also included changes that would reduce barrier to additional housing units. But AB 130 essentially said that it would prohibit any changes to residential code that would make development of housing harder. And so we kind of took it off the plate as part of our 2025 update. And the AB 130 term runs through 2031. So it is something that we could always revisit in the future. But at this time, based on our communication and collaboration with the Five Cities Fire Department, as well as CALBO, the California Association of Building Officials, as well as our own building official, this really is a fire and life safety issue. So establishing the appropriate policies to combat those concerns would be key. I'm also happy to, this is really open forum, so I'm happy to pause after each topic so it doesn't go stale by the end of the meeting, if you'd like to stop and ask questions of Mr. Sadowski.
I think it would be good to go kind of topic by topic.
I agree.
Okay.
Great. I'll pause here then and ask if there are any questions.
Commissioner Holden? Vice Chair Swift?
Yeah, I guess my question is, where does the local fire authority stand on this? Because I know when we when we were asked to take on fire sprinklers, for example, in remodels and new development, that was driven largely by the local fire authorities because it, kept fires from spreading faster, gave them more time to get in, gave people more time to get out. And so if the fire safety is evolving over time, how do they feel about this kind of a change given other fire safety features that are being incorporated into the building?
Yeah, so my communications with Chief Scott Hallett of Five Cities Fire Authority is that there's concern over this type of policy shift. However, we are also so early in this as a process that should it be even on the table for consideration, we would need to find something that is equal to or better than the preventative measures that would otherwise be in place with two stairwells. So for example, in other cities where this has been implemented and implemented successfully, one such as Culver City, they might require additional water and pressure to the fire sprinkler systems. They might require additional fire ratings in building materials. They might require again, I'll pause and offer Mr. Sadowski some space to answer some of the ways in which folks are armoring buildings that are allowed to do this. But one of the other things that Chief Hallett mentioned was if it were even to be a consideration, we would really limit it to, similar to what Culver City has done, limit it to the number of units as well as the number of stories. So for purposes of this, it's a little bit too early in the process to really say what a formal opinion would be by our fire chief, but it does cause him some concern and pause, which we treat with the utmost respect. So it is his area of expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my understanding that there's a state study ongoing regarding this topic, and so I maybe have, in wanting to talk about it, in previous meetings or mentioning it in previous meetings, was sort of jumping ahead of where other things, understanding that this is a big discussion. So maybe it's my understanding. It sounds like this maybe needs to be on the back burner, if you will. That's a fire joke, maybe not funny. Okay, that bombed.
Chairman, to speak on that topic regarding the work in progress, the governor's office under Assembly Bill 835 had directed the state fire marshal to conduct a study and provide a report on the single stair considerations. And the deadline for that report was to be submitted at the end of last month, I believe. So we have not received or been able to view that publication yet to determine what the recommendations or evaluation was at this time. And so once that does become more public knowledge and just available to view, we'll be able to analyze that a bit more and discuss with industry partners on considerations that can be taken to potentially entertain this topic. As Director Martin mentioned, some of the trade-offs are with building and fire codes is you can't reduce the state standards, the mandatory standards, and so oftentimes you have to demonstrate some level of equivalency or increased fire protection, and she gave some examples of some of those, but the Culver City one, I believe, limited it to a total of 4 residential units was their guidance.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions on that topic for staff.
Shall I continue?
Yes.
Great.
Let's continue.
So I think this topic was fairly covered throughout 2025 with a couple of different projects that we had come forward, but ultimately just wanting to offer clarification to your commission regarding height limits for accessory dwelling units. It's important to note here there are 2 different types of accessory dwelling units within the realm of state housing law. One is known as a 66314 ADU, and the other is known as a 66323. And I won't ask you to remember those numbers, just know that one is subject to our local ordinances as well as our development standards, and the other, 66323, is what's known as a by right or a state exempt ADU. And so for both attached types of ADUs, the maximum height limit for those ADUs is up to 25 feet or the height limitation of the underlying zone, whichever is lower. The second is for detached ADUs. So again, both 66314 as well as 66323. If you're a single-family residential development, the maximum height allowed for a detached ADU is 16 feet. For multifamily, it is 18 feet. In either, if you're within a half mile of a transit stop, major transit stop, you can go up to 20 feet, but the asterisk is there and is further clarified at the bottom of your screen that 20 feet includes the roof pitch. So the maximum height of your ADU for detached would be 18 feet with a 20-foot roof pitch, not an addition with a 2-foot roof pitch. Any questions on height limits for ADUs?
Yeah, I think
Are we going in order or are we just jumping in? I don't know.
reverse alphabetical order.
Go ahead, Vice Chair. I will return to you.
The H's always go first. Sorry, thank you. The final wording that you put in the code, I think it basically kept it loose enough definition on the half mile from a transit stop such that as the state designation of transit stops evolves, the person doing the development or adding the ADU would be able to look and say, okay, now I'm within a distance from a transit stop, and so the other code applies. But it's written in such that we're at the lowest level until that kicks in or that definition changes, and then they can go to the higher level. Is that right?
Yes, I believe I follow you. I think as I recall, the concern was your commission, as well as the council, did not want this height limit to apply citywide. We were looking at it, projecting forward what the definition of a transit stop might evolve into. And so for ease of implementation as part of our code, we said, how about we apply this citywide? And your commission advised us and directed us to come back or the council advised us and directed us to come back to the commission to discuss, at which point we limited it to only within a half a mile of a major transit stop.
And so where it's at today is a detached ADU in a single-family zone, as near as 4 feet side and rear setbacks can only be 16 feet. Unless they're within a half mile of a transit.
Unless within a half mile of a transit.
Right, okay, so citywide, other than a few places where that may become like the train station or the bus station or something new, they're now at 16 feet at the back fence.
Yes, and if it is a 66314 unit, it is subject to our development standards, for example, objective design standards, which we'll get into later in this presentation. If it's a 66323 unit, it is not subject to our development standards.
And what drives the distinction between those two again?
You want to speak to that?
Yes, it is subject. This is up to subject to a lot of debate between planners and HCD representatives. We just had a lengthy call the other day to learn more about their interpretations on how to implement these sections. But essentially, the 66323 code spells out 3 types of ADUs, one inclusive of a JADU, that are exempt from any sort of local control. And so those 3 types are a specific detached unit, which is, I believe, less than 800 square feet. And then the other one would be an interior unit, so a conversion of either an existing or proposed single-family residence would qualify as a 66323. There's a few standards that apply under the state law that talk about size, setbacks, and height, but anything beyond those we are not able to regulate locally. And then any sort of attached ADU would not be subject to 66323. That would fall under 66314, which we do have local control over objective standards. But the problem is that there are detached ADUs under 66323 and detached ADUs under 66323. So there is each type of ADU falls under both categories.
So I think just summarizing, you asked which is 66323, which is 66314. So 3 types under 66323. There's interior conversion of a single-family residential to an ADU. So interior, there's a JADU, and then there's a detached up to 800 square feet. So those are the three types. So if you fall under any of those when you submit your application, one of the first things we have to look at is if somebody says, here's my application for an ADU, and it's detached and it's 800 square feet, it is automatically a 66323 unit, and
So
it's
it-
processed as such.
So a detached under 800 square feet is a 66323, and that can go as high as the height limit for the underlying zone.
No,
No.
all ADUs are subject to the same height limitations under the state law. And our ordinance reflects the maximum allowances under state law. So in any scenario that the height limits that we had on the screen for the detached ADU would apply. So
Okay.
that would be 18 feet for multifamily, 16 feet for single family, unless you're in proximity to a train station.
So are there, maybe the easier way for me to ask you this, since you're more familiar with the nuance of this code, are there any circumstances, given the way you've written our local code and what the state is requiring, that we would see new ADUs 25 feet tall on the 4-foot back and side setbacks?
Yes.
The scenarios are endless, but yes, if your existing primary unit is legal non-conforming, for example, and somebody wants to do an attached ADU to that legal non-conforming residence that's in that 4-foot setback, for example, you could go up to 25 feet.
Attached
That-
ADUs would be the only one subject to that.
Yeah.
Attached.
That was also our reasoning behind the blanket. Maybe this should just apply citywide. And, we recognize after the fact that the level of input that was needed, that was a mistake, and we wouldn't repeat that same policy reach again. But that exact scenario is why we kind of said, well, we don't know how many residential units could face this scenario. Maybe just to make it easier for implementation and for interpretation, when somebody comes to the counter, we just blanket 25 feet. But this is much better.
Yeah, and it seems like it's going to be the exception.
Exception to the rule, for
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
For sure. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Commissioner Holden? Any questions on this topic? I don't have any more questions on this
Okay.
topic. Shall we move on to the next one?
Great. Our next favorite one under accessory dwelling units, so parking requirements for ADUs. So state law requires one parking space per accessory dwelling unit, except parking and/or replacement parking. Is not required if it is for a junior ADU, also known as a JADU. If you are converting garage, carport, or covered parking to the ADU, or if you're within a half-a-mile walking distance of public transit, not to be confused with a major transit stop, which limits and/or allows for the exception of height in the previous slides that I showed you. So just a bus station, train station, any type of public transit. This actually captures every single area of Grover Beach. So that's why it is bold on your screen. So any application for an ADU that comes into the city is not required to replace parking. And then for just others and into the record, replacement parking is not required within an architecturally or historically significant district. If the ADU is part of the existing primary residence, on-street parking permits are required but not offered to the ADU occupant, and ADUs located within one block of a car share, a vehicle car share program. Any questions, or can
I'm
I
going
move
to go
to
back
unique?
to my alphabetical order. Commissioner Holden? Vice Chair Swift?
I think we've discussed parking a lot. And I know in gross numbers, the city is considered underparked right now. And, the question is, as this takes off and we see, larger and larger conversion of, for example, places that have garages, multi-unit places that have garages that all get converted to ADUs, and effectively doubling the use and eliminating the on-site parking. Does the with your transportation study and with the police department, is there some notional plan for what to do going forward? Any projections on what this looks like, when it becomes a problem, how the police department deals with it?
Police isn't here, so I can't speak on their behalf. Our plan is to continue to comply with state law. That is our plan.
Understood.
I think if I have any questions on that, on parking as it relates to ADUs. I don't think so. We have another parking slide, so we can go on to that.
Apologies, I skipped ahead while you were mid-thought,
That's
I
fine.
think. So as I mentioned at the intro of the item, one thing that came up for us in 2025 was we had back-to-back public hearings on some pretty unique and exciting uses. One was the batting cages over off of Newport, and the other was an arcade. And one of the questions that came up was whether or not the parking demand for those uses would be sufficient for the supply that was offered within the lot. And so just wanted to provide some clarification and answer any questions that your commission may have on how staff analyzes and addresses parking requirements for different types of land uses, and then also offer some insight as to what our next steps might be. So for some land use types, staff will require a parking demand analysis, typically when there is disagreement between staff and the applicant for required parking. So for example, the Anytime Fitness application that we heard earlier today, let's say that that parking lot was underparked. Then Mr. Bell is coordinating with the applicant to say additional parking may be required, but if you believe otherwise, provide us with some level of analysis that demonstrates that you are providing sufficient parking. So sometimes that can happen between staff and the applicant. And what we look for is if it doesn't exist as a land use category within our development code, we look for a comparable land use determination. So we review it closely with similar uses. What is most comparable with an arcade? What is most comparable with a batting cage facility? And we apply that ratio as the starting point. What's known as the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking General Manual, they are the Institute for Transportation Engineers have established a methodology for selecting comparable land use codes. Following that in-depth discussion after both of those items, our staff purchased both the parking manual as well as the general transportation manual to ensure that we have that on hand in the event that anything like this comes out into the future. But we then consult those industry standards that are developed by the ITE, or the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And all of their parking calculations are based off of empirical data and actual case studies. We also consider local context and policy direction, including transit accessibility, walkable mixed-use areas, surrounding land use, proximity to public parking, and can sometimes even go so far as to utilize California's Office of Planning and Research general plan guidelines, specifically from the mobility element if needed. And then ultimately, once an application's been, reviewed by staff for its consistency, if it is a unique land use that's not identified in our development code, and we've analyzed it, compared it with the ITE's manual and other case studies, we rely on the Planning Commission during public hearing. And your role is to determine that it is consistent with similar uses, supported by the analysis either conducted by the applicant or conducted by staff. And then document that in the findings. And then where possible, we would formalize the determination. So if we suddenly saw an influx of multiple arcade applications, it may be time for us to then consider updating our development code to include arcades as a certain type of land use requiring an actual parking demand analysis and a ratio that's codified, rather than requiring the lengthy analysis each time that a new application is presented. So that was a lot, apologies, but available for any questions on that if you have them.
Commissioner Holden? Vice Chair Swift?
Yeah, so you got the ITE manuals now, so are those available for certainly us, but also for public to look at?
Yeah, anything, any any document within city record is available for public consumption. We would just, similar to any public records request, likely need to be present so that nothing gets, no sheets get taken or anything like that. But yes,
Yeah.
it would be available to you.
Because when this conversation came up originally, you hadn't bought them yet, and so I was hunting around for ways to see them electronically, and I never got the manuals, but what I did get was I got a lot of the actual case studies, right? I could basically get pointed at the case studies. And the thing that jumped out at me the most in the case studies is I was telling Mr. Bell this earlier, they never seem to address what I would call our unique city, right? We're this tiny little urban island in the middle of a suburban or a rural area, and the case studies usually look at, major cities around transit centers, and so I'd be curious to look at some of these manuals and see how you go in and pick out what gets used to sort of apples to apples compare for a community like Grover Beach, which is very out of the ordinary, at least from what I saw in the case studies, very out of the ordinary. So look forward to seeing some of those calculations done.
Absolutely, and I can confirm that the manual is broken up by jurisdiction type. So there is parking demand specific for suburban jurisdictions as well as urban jurisdictions, and they have definitions of those. I believe our community, even though we are relatively rural, we do fall under the definition of suburban in this kind of instance.
If I may, have you finished?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I found it interesting on the previous slide. I believe we may be the only municipality in the county that has every parcel within half a mile of a bus stop.
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, that seems like that would influence the amount of parking you would need. So I wonder if the part of that definition of urban versus suburban versus rural speaks to the availability of bus service.
Absolutely, and that also contributes to the trip generation manual that we have. There are mathematical equations you can factor in due to distance between transit stops that can apply to the parking demand manual. So you can reconfigure the parking ratios based off of proximity of transit, and it's all math, which is great and fun.
We've been having fun with our manuals.
I feel like you're in the right position, in the right job, if that's a thing that's exciting to you. Okay. I have no other questions on the parking and land use. Let's go on to e-bikes.
So one of the other items that came up was regulations and policies for e-bikes, particularly that around safety, just both of vehicles on the road, pedestrians on the road, but also safety for those that are utilizing the e-bikes. So really the question was kind of like, hey, how are these being regulated? I'm seeing more around town, both on just residential streets, but as well as on West Grand Avenue. So as I've come to learn, there are many different rules, and those different rules apply to different types of e-bikes. Similar to ADUs, there's so many different scenarios that then you have to apply the correct regulation to the type of e-bike that you are riding. So it is much more complicated than I care to express. But ultimately, e-bikes are regulated by California Vehicle Code. Cities' police departments encountered a couple of minor issues, but none that warrant any level of concern. So I coordinated with our chief of police, and he does not believe that any additional regulation or municipal code updates are necessary at this time as it relates to e-bikes. And so they also indicated that they have every tool that they need to enforce any issues surrounding e-bikes as they arise. So any future consideration of public e-bike use, we can address and assess under our circulation element update, just part of the overall kind of broad spectrum of the different types of mobility that is evolving the different types of mobility options that folks have as they continue to come up with new technology, and how we can address it through policy we'll consider through our circulation element.
Right.
Also, the commissioner who had identified this isn't here this evening, unfortunately, but hopefully, if you have anything you'd like to add, happy to transcribe.
Commissioner Holden, did you have any comments on this one? Vice Chair Swift?
Yeah, I guess thinking about what you said, looking out to the future, if things change, you'll go back to the code. And I know we've talked about bike parking at some of the newer developments, and the question is, new buildings have to have a place to charge your electric car in the garage. There's an electric car charger requirement for a garage. Do you anticipate us seeing electric bike charging requirements around bike racks? And also, do the e-bikes change the fire safety thought process for some of these buildings where they're now bringing in, I would say, some fairly large lithium batteries into the building interior in a closet? Has that discussion occurred at all?
That was not one of the topics the chief of police and I discussed. Building code regulates the number of bike spaces that are required, as well as our development code. As it relates to emerging legislation, I would look to our building official to maybe speak to anything he's heard whispers of through Calbo, but not to my knowledge. You're already here.
He's standing right there.
Mark's right there. Yeah.
On that topic, the recent example I was part of was a neighboring agency with a large multifamily housing project where bike parking was a requirement of the conditions of approval. But given the nature of technology and industry moving towards e-bikes being more prevalent, a question arose, well, what are we doing for e-bike charging? Are people expected to, in a non-elevated building, haul their heavy electronic bike up 3 flights of stairs, or do we provide them with a separate room where they have restricted access, and that room is set up for e-bike charging stations? And so this particular project, I believe they were going to add some e-bike charging stations, and to the fire aspects of it, you would treat it similar to like a small garage where you would fire rate the inside, you would have fire sprinkler protection, as elements to consider, and then they could evaluate, from an electrical perspective, what do these things take to charge? Most of them, I would assume, plug into a 110 outlet in the home, but if you have a large, quantity of these things in a room, you do need to set up, additional electrical provisions for like a multifamily development to provide that for the residents.
And may I ask a question?
Sure.
Any code requirements or any whispers from Calvo about whether or not there's code requirements for installing charging stations for e-bikes, or public charging stations for e-bikes as part of projects?
I have not heard about that topic yet, but I would not be surprised if it came as part of the mid-cycle code amendments. So our building codes are adopted every 3 years, but then every 18 months they have what they call mid-cycle amendments or urgency updates. And I would not be surprised if this was one of those topics that made its way into the upcoming mid-cycle amendment. The tricky part is, as Director Martin mentioned, the AB 130 provisions and making it an additional restriction on a residential development. So the state would have to evaluate imposing additional restrictions for providing electric bike charging stations as part of that consideration.
But I will further Mr. Sadowski's comments. Commissioner Swift, if an application comes in which they do propose charging stations for e-bikes, we would refer the project to our fire safety experts, both from our building consultant, JS, as well as Five Cities Fire Authority, to get their feedback and any recommendations that they would want as part of that addition, that component to the development.
Thank you.
But in the recent example, it was they had a certain number of bike spaces that were required for the project. And so they decided to make a portion of those electric charging capable. So it wasn't a big impact to this particular project. But there wasn't additional e-bike parking beyond what the project already required.
Anything else? This topic kind of leads me to it. I don't know if we need to necessarily think about you must have this, but I think it would be good to communicate because it would be a very nice amenity. You may, and here's how to do it safely.
And that could be a really great addition to policies within our circulation element around alternative means of transportation for e-bikes or development projects that include e-bike charging stations. These types of amenities may be considered, right? But it would be a should, not a shall. And then we would leave it to, as part of the application, our 5 cities fire authority and our our contracted fire marshal to kind of provide additional advice and recommendations for that application.
And in terms of kind of public safety, are concerns and about regulations and policies for e-bikes coming from the e-bike owners? Are they coming from drivers who are lacking in confidence that they can adapt?
I can't speak to that. Commissioner Halverson requested some additional information regarding our coordination with police and just regulations and policies for e-bikes. He, I believe, was seeing more around the community. So I would defer to him at our March 3rd next Planning Commission meeting to better understand the objective behind the topic.
Sure. And at that point, maybe we think about, well, are there sort of engineering controls, since I have an engineer on here, that would improve public safety, such as lowering speed limits?
Well,
You
and
know,
again,
those kinds of things.
Chief Monroe's indicated that these are regulated by California Vehicle Code. So he doesn't see any need at this point in time based on his team's involvement in compliance issues with e-bikes in the community at this time. So.
And we don't at this point have had any major accidents in terms of injuries or deaths from an e-bike striking a pedestrian?
I can't answer that question.
Okay.
We have some with e-bikes striking parked vehicles. And I think part of that conversation that Mr. Halverson brought was the band of roving e-motorcycles zooming up and down Grover Heights just after dark, that they're actually not e-bikes, they're e-motorcycles. So they're outside of this scope.
I don't have any additional questions. I think there's still a lot to learn about the topic and see how it is playing out as things get adopted.
The next few are the fun ones. So we made it. So staff and the commission have heard repeatedly that recent development does not embody the character of Grover Beach. So the question is, well, what is the character and how do we find it? So I just wanted to highlight for your commission and allow you, again, the platform to discuss amongst yourselves as well as ask us questions about our objective design standard. So during the 2022 code update, the city did prepare and adopt the following objective design standards for single unit development, accessory dwelling units, but again, 66314 units only. 66324 units are not subject to our design standards. Multifamily detached cluster developments, also commonly referred to as a planned unit development or a PUD. Multifamily mixed use attached, so between 2 to 9 units, and then multifamily mixed use attached greater than 10 units. So each of these were adopted as part of the 2022 update. And the intent here was to both provide for objective standards that were easy to follow but provided maximum flexibility and options for new development. Those objective standards are unique to the type of housing as I just listed. We did seek feedback from architects as well as property owners that were building single unit development as well as architects, property owners that had developed single unit developments, as well as developers, local developers. And they've all told us repeatedly that the standards are flexible and some of the best in the county. No, thank you. Sorry. Okay. That they offered flexibility and options for new development, but that further analysis would be needed along with extensive public outreach if we were to define what the character of Grover Beach is. And so I just, again, want to put this back to your commission. You wanted to kind of have the platform to speak more on this amongst yourselves. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this item, find consensus amongst yourselves if it's something that you did want to forward to the council for consideration in future policy decisions. also wanted to put this up, and maybe this is what we can use to kind of further the conversation, but this is just an overview and summary of the checklist requirements that are within each of those checklists. So we look at driveway design, we look at massing requirements, for example, upper floor step backs, cutouts, building orientation, building materials, including prohibited materials, facade articulation, building transparency, front entry requirements for residential versus non-residential, requirements for variety in height and roof forms, as well as privacy considerations, namely window placement. So just based on that, like I said, opening up to your commission to have further discussion and ask questions, and let us know if there's anything that you'd like to discuss further.
Sure. Commissioner Holden. Vice Chair Swift.
Yeah, I guess my question is back to you and Mr. Bell. Given your experience in writing development code, objective design standards, do you think it's even possible to write the standards in such a way that it would drive an underlying characteristic design for Grover Beach?
It would need
Short
to be.
of saying they're all Spanish style with tile roofs and.
Well, that's what would need to kind of come out of this. What does your commission amongst yourselves, based on what you've heard from the community, as well as what you've heard from the community at these various agendas that we've had on recent development projects? What is that character? So staff writes policies based off of, one, council direction, but ultimately public input. And if it overwhelmingly, as the public says, we want to see Spanish style with a specific type of roofing, and we want, this, and this, then we're going to write policy to ensure that certain neighborhoods or certain corridors or the entire city architecturally develops as such. If Grover wants to remain groovy Grover, and we want variety in how we design and develop, right now our objective standards provide for that level of flexibility. What staff cannot do is dictate what a private property owner can do on their property. So as long as it meets the standards that are codified, we then have to present that to your commission and say, this meets our code. This is compliant with state law, and what say you? So I think to answer your question, additional public outreach would need to be done in order for the community to inform us what those policies need to be in order for us to write the correct standards.
Yeah.
But
and I'll give this is going to be my observation, and I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong before. My wife tells me that all the time. That the eclectic nature of the development in Grover Beach, represents 60 plus years of people building whatever they wanted to build at the time, or whatever might have been in style at the time, and even the Spanish style building that is Beach Plaza. What's the one? Is that what it's called? Beach Plaza? What's the one at the end of Grand Avenue on the south side?
Oh, okay.
Beach Place.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Beach Place. So even, Beach Place, may be representative of the trend at the time. And what we're seeing with the current developments is the trend of the time. And you see that throughout the country, right? This is sort of the style that's being built right now. And it will evolve, and whatever happens after this will be the trend of the time. The problem is we have a couple of years of very, very large buildings that will be the trend of the time, and that will dominate the overall character for a large section of the new development in town. So picking a character, so to speak, is more about maintaining a varied and eclectic character than a specific, we're going to look like Santa Barbara character. And so how do we do that? Now, this is my question to this group, right? How do you do that? One, you get the community's input, I guess. Things like upper floor setbacks can have a big impact on the overall feel of a building in terms of its massing and its, how much it imposes on the streets and so on. And I think those were taken out of our code, weren't they? The upper floor setbacks, were those taken out of the code at the revision?
No, they apply to residential zoned properties only,
okay.
not commercial. Sorry, that's what I was just asking him right now.
Yeah, so if those went back into the commercial areas or the CBOs and the CVS districts, would that radically change the character of, what we're seeing along the West Grand corridor?
If I could jump in real quick.
Sure.
Just for clarification, the upper story setback in commercial zones is an optional item in our objective design standards, and it could be required. And so there's a lot of optional features in our code right now that could be reconsidered as, as appropriate in different maybe zones or types of buildings. And I have more to add, but I'll let you keep going. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm stream of consciousness here right now. It's, what could be done to not allow a single current trend in architecture dominate the future of Grover Beach, right? Go ahead. You wanted to say something.
No, I want to echo that sentiment. And I think something that staff has heard loud and clear from both the community as well as from the commission, and what we have communicated to all of our applicants since some of the developments have moved forward and been approved, is it needs to look different. It needs to have more variety. And more recently, we had an application come forward to your commission, a pre-application come forward to your commission with the sole purpose to say, okay, we hear you. How do you want this to look? So the fruits of that labor, of identifying that, are coming to reality. And so the next step is for your commission, as I mentioned, this is the platform for you to be able to discuss this amongst yourself, and you ask the question, what do you want? What do you want to recommend to the council for them to consider to direct staff on policy? And we don't have answers today because we don't have that direction from council. But if it is something that they take on, then yes, extensive public outreach would be conducted to define and better understand what eclectic means, what groovy means, how we find variety, from one building to the next. Mm-hmm. Applying step backs as mandatory if over 3 feet. Or 3 feet. Sorry, 3 stories. So
3 feet.
3 feet. We're done. So I just kind of wanted to provide that additional context. I think what we're seeing is that how the commission is communicating and approving the projects, but through critical and constructive feedback to the applicants, we're starting to see that come to reality with applications that we're getting in, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think the applicant that you were talking about, where we had, 4 or 5 options, I think most of us picked the Cape Cod-ish looking option, and the applicant kind of rolled their eyes thinking, well, I wanted to make this boxy one over here instead. But yeah, that was nice to have an option, and I hope those recommendations will influence some of the applicants. But I do think providing feedback to the council to look at not only the community feedback, but also some minor revisions, for example, bringing back the upper floor step backs, will have a big impact on the overall feel of the buildings, especially on West Grand. Even if they don't evolve architecturally over time for 3, 4, 5 years, I don't know, what's the architectural trend life cycle?
There's actually a study about that. I just wanted to add one more note from my experience in writing development codes. One of the easiest features to create an objective design standard is to prohibit what we don't like. So if there's a specific design feature that is not appropriate for Grover Beach, a lot easier to identify and update a codes to reflect. But I just want to send that out there because if you want to keep it objective, that's one of the best tools we have. So for instance, like a mansard roof, which is
what?
A Mansford roof.
A mansard roof. This is one example that comes to my mind, or faux shutters or things like that.
What is a Mansford roof?
Oh, it's a very specific roof style that is common in cold climates.
I apologize for getting a little informal. Kyle's now listing the things that he
he
gripes
likes.
about when we get an application in process. I think all of this with the caveat, and we'll get into this in the next topic, but all of this to say, again, our job as practitioners is to ensure that decisions that you make and advice that you give to the council is compliant with state law. So regardless of what options we may have to rewrite policy to reflect, again, Groovy Grover, we still have to write that policy in compliance with state law and state housing law. So again, early in the process, if this is something that your commission wants to forward to the council for recommendations and or for future policy decisions, this is one of those items that we can forward to them.
So, taking what you just said, upper floor setbacks currently are optional, and if the recommendation was to make those mandatory on commercial as well as single family, does that fall under AB 130 and you can't change the code?
Not under AB 130,
Okay.
but if you have a project that qualifies under Housing Accountability Act or protections under state density bonus law, a developer could waive that standard because it would prohibit them from being able to provide the additional units that allow for that density bonus. So these are all great options. I just want to caveat it with the understanding, and that's part of tonight. I want you to understand how your decisions can also be affected by state law.
So what's the action from us? Is it to recommend the council take this up, recommend the council study it, do a community survey to understand what they can do to evolve the character, define a character? What's our action?
Are we in the discussion part? I had some additional questions for staff that I want to get into.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think maybe the overarching thing, so we got to the current code through the housing element of 2020 process, and then the land use element update process. And looking back through the minutes of that process, it started on 2/12/2020 with a public workshop that had 18 people. And I don't know if you were there. I'm pretty confident I was there.
I wasn't living here yet.
You weren't living here. And then because of COVID, all of the additional meetings, of which there are at least 3 public meetings, so a joint city council and public commission or planning commission meeting, a planning commission meeting, and another city council meeting, of which there are all minutes. Those were all held online through Teams, which for many people was more accessible rather than less, as we were at home. And then the land use element, the first mention I found of that was in 2021 at the Planning Commission, where Community Development Director Buckingham announced they were, the consultants had been hired. And then there were another 5 public meetings for the land use element, of which many were held online, but 3 were in person because we were back into 2022 and we'd gone back. Still not a lot of commenters, and I think part of that is to show up for those things, you had to be motivated by the crisis to actually want to make a change. And if you were living comfortably, securely, that may not have been at the top of your mind. I also want to point out, because we've talked a lot about state law, since 2017, I have a spreadsheet of at least 40 new laws related to the state, either leading with a carrot or pushing with something less pleasant to get communities to allow more construction because of the housing crisis. And so in a community like this, there's only so many levers that you can push, of which many here are listed, so you can go higher, which I understand has surprised a lot of community members. So you could go higher on properties that where we wanted to have more density along the main drag, which is mostly what we decided to do to meet our housing element numbers. Or you could have selected more properties that could go to three stories. So, for example, in the R1 zones. It seemed like at the time, as we went through all those meetings, the consensus based on the people who had been elected and had been appointed was to encourage that growth along the main drag. And in order to do that and also achieve the types of homes that we thought the community would need, things that would be more accessible, things that would have an elevator, that might have some ground floor units, that seemed the most reasonable approach at the time. So that's how we got here. But it has meant, all of that is to say, we got the code, we've gone to these objective standards, and we're seeing what those objective standards look like in real life. And part of that is I don't think too many of our larger projects have had a peaked roof, right? They're all flat roofs. And that may be because that's what the market we're kind of we got it to a height where a project could pencil out, but it's maybe not the most glamorous looking project still. I think it's fine. But again, that's in the eye of the beholder. But just to reiterate, there are so many restrictions on us at this time, at least going through 2030 and into, I think, the extension of SB 35 goes to 2036. And so I think it would be very difficult to reduce heights where we've already allowed them, not only because it would infringe on people's property rights that they've been granted to take those away, and I am not a lawyer, but I have read the Constitution. And if we were to do that, we would have to increase heights in other places, or reduce parking requirements, or reduce setbacks. And that's just my understanding of how I read the law. And so since we're all in a position here where we took an oath to uphold the constitutions of the U.S. and the state of California, here we are. So thank you for the rant there. And I'm happy to share the information I've collected on the meetings and my spreadsheet of the state laws with anyone if they're interested. But bringing that back, what are the levers available to us that might improve, in some people's minds, what we're seeing? I had a question about, do we in our mixed use allow for the top floor to have a restaurant and a more public rooftop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, a mixed-use project can be any combination of residential and commercial.
Okay, so we don't have anything keeping a developer from offering that
No.
that arrangement of homes
No.
and commercial. Okay. I had a question about in the standards, and I'm looking at the checklist for the largest one, since that seems to be the one that's generated the most conversation. Regarding massing and facade articulation, I think we request at least one item from the following categories, but we often see a lot more than that. And I wonder if that is just people going belt and suspenders to make sure that things get approved. Like, do you have an impression on how people are making decisions about the designs they're submitting?
No, it's not really a conversation that staff's privy to have.
Sure.
We just refocus when it doesn't meet our standards.
Okay. In terms of the facade or facade, I guess, requirements, we talk about articulation, but is there a discussion about, we talk about facade materials, which could include a change in, okay, we do have color in there as well. All right, I was curious if that was in there, and I guess, and now I'm seeing it. And then in terms of height and roof forms, I think the only thing in there has to do with if longer than 50 foot. There has to be some sort of interval, right?
Correct. I believe the standard you're referring to is that if a stretch of wall is greater than a certain linear distance, then it needs to have some level of articulation. Correct.
Right. So I think the home builders that are bringing us projects are in good faith trying to meet what we, the checklist that we have provided. And so I think the thing that we could, if we could find a way for that discussion, I think, to dovetail with our next housing element discussion, I think that would be useful, since where we are today started way back then. And I don't know the appropriate way to do that, but hopefully it would be, instead of having two discussions and two surveys and kind of two parallel paths, if we could find a way to identify those preferences through the process of the housing element, I think that would be helpful.
When's housing element coming up for revision again?
Now. As always, I like to get a jump on things. So our current cycle, the sixth cycle, the term ends in 2028. So it typically takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years to update a housing element. This cycle, our seventh cycle, will be required to complete an affirmatively furthering fair housing survey. So I've given us a 2-year span. And so I'm in the process of preparing a request for proposals for consultants. That'll be released at the beginning of April, and hoping to have a consultant under contract by summer. And then we'll provide extensive public outreach as part of that. The survey will identify our demographics throughout the entire community, and exactly what you're asking for and kind of the other items that have been discussed tonight will be on the table for consideration. Again, all in the name of finding that character of Grover Beach, while also developing a housing element that's compliant with state law.
And so that timeline really is, given our history, 4 years.
No, oh no.
4 years
I
before we have a
anticipate
code
I'll have a
revision.
draft in 2028, and adoption will need to occur prior to December of 2028
That's for the housing element.
for the seventh cycle housing element.
But that
Correct.
wouldn't get folded into the development code until after that. Is that right?
Correct. So sometimes they can be done concurrently. So as you're working through the housing element update, you identify different needs within the development code, and they can run concurrently together. But this last cycle that we did, the housing element was updated in 2020, and the development code followed suit by 2022.
That was the origin of my 4 years before the development code changes, right? Is
Appreciate
it-
that. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's a pretty long cycle time, right? So 4 years from now is 2030, and the last code change happened in 22, so that's 8 years. We saw development starting kind of 23, 24 from that code change, and so we would have 6 to 8 years of kind of the current code running before the new code came out. Running on developments.
Consistent with whatever the housing element ends up looking like. But don't forget, our team's committed to, as closely as we can, annual audits of our code and how it's working and how we can improve upon it, which is why our 2024 turned 2025 code update came in front of your commission and ultimately was certified by the Coastal Commission. We found items that were deficient, and we sought to improve those. So we'll continue to identify areas within our code that can be updated prior to our housing element being adopted. We're limited to 4 amendments per year, but I don't see any concern or have any issue with us being able to accomplish that. But as it relates to the outcome of what changes within our housing element, yes, we'll have to wait for those policies to be in place, see what programs are ultimately adopted by the council, and then our development code would follow suit.
But minor tweaks to the development code, given lessons learned today, could be made.
Absolutely.
Staff time permitting, right?
So with council direction, yeah. And again, with your recommendations to the council based on this.
So that's the best we can do, is that these topics just go along with, get presented with your information.
Yes.
Plus do it sooner than later.
Well,
The council will have to direct us on that. They direct our, they direct the city manager then directs my work program.
Understood.
So, yes, that could be direction, is that there are certain components of our development code that have to be updated, but it's a puzzle. If I'm going to update the development code, our existing certified housing element, any code update that we have in our development code has to be consistent with our current cycle. If it's not, then we can't make those changes. And right now, the state's message is anything that makes housing more difficult would be in non-compliance with housing element law and housing accountability and density. Yeah. So it's just, it's a dance. It is a dance. And I'll just look to City Attorney Thompson. Is there anything that you want to add to that point? We also have 2 more topics to get through, so.
I don't think so. There's been a lot of discussion, and I don't think I have anything to add. Yeah.
Which means that we haven't misspoke, which is great news.
Yeah, I think going back to where we started this conversation of the community is finally seeing the results of the code changes.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they were paying attention and didn't visualize what it was going to look like, or whether they weren't paying attention because we were locked down under COVID, the reality is that we're sort of seeing the fruits of those changes. And that being able to go back and tweak, both for the community and for, are we getting the housing numbers we want? Are the builders, delivering above and beyond what was asked for? Is the community happy with some of it and not other pieces? It would be nice to see that folded into the council's thinking. So,
Which would be a great topic for your joint council and commission meeting coming up on March 31st.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I would just like to add that risk of decertification of the housing element. There is, are we familiar with builder's remedy? Can you speak to what that is briefly?
Sure.
And what
Yeah,
that would mean?
so-
shall not state that name ever.
So at a very high level, a city or county or agency that doesn't have a certified housing element is subject to the builder's remedy, which is essentially permission for a developer to build almost anything that they want, anywhere that they want. That's probably a bit of an extreme description. There is a requirement that those projects include a pretty significant component of affordable housing, so that is one benefit to the city. But for example, a developer could build a residential project in a commercial zone, or just, they don't have to necessarily comply with most of the city's codes. And so, you think that there's a feeling that local agencies don't have local control now. Well, just imagine if a development doesn't even have to comply with most of the city's codes. So that's why it's really critical to have your housing element certified on time, because even a short delay, if you don't meet that January 1st, I believe, 2028 deadline, 29, sorry, then the city would be subject to builder's remedy, could potentially be subject to daily fines from the Attorney General. I mean, there's a lot of negative consequences. So there's great incentive for them to get that done on time.
Well, and to maintain a certified.
Yeah, and to maintain, right, to not lose your certification.
I think there are a couple of examples where cities have tried to downsize after the fact and have gotten sued by the state, which I would like to try to avoid.
Yeah, that's best.
So that's a good question. If you changed upper floor setbacks or changed max height in zones, do you fall out of compliance with your certified housing element?
If you limit density of any type that's already established in the housing element, yes, you may be subject to decertification or just financial penalties enforced through HCD. So if we identify an area in which we want to reduce density, it would have to be located someplace else in our community. Chair Mann spoke to this earlier, but one of the strategies that was used was to locate that density and intensity of residential development to accomplish our 6-cycle RHNA numbers along the commercial corridor to avoid residential neighborhoods. So if we eliminate that density, could be a reduction in height, could be a step back, could be setbacks, could be any number of things, parking. If we eliminate that, require more parking, but if we eliminate that density, we have to replace it elsewhere in the community. And so again, the March 31st date is going to be where this is discussed further, and to better understand whether or not it is more appropriate to have this run with the housing element update, and then those updates come from that. The development code updates come from that.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments on this one, or shall we proceed with the rest of the items? Thank you very much for a robust discussion.
Okay. One down, 2 more to go. Mixed-use development. So again, recent project approvals, as well as just project applications, there's been a question of whether the definition of mixed use of a mixed-use project is appropriate for our community. Chapter 9 of our development code defines a mixed-use project as one that combines both residential and commercial uses on the same site. We then look at allowable uses within a mixed-use development. We reference Chapter 2, zones and allowable land uses. For this item, one of the key pieces for your commission to remember is that mixed use, which includes residential, is considered a protected category under the Housing Accountability Act and the Housing Crisis Act. So this limits a city's discretion and approval authority. So looking ahead, this is again one of those key items that the council and your commission will consider it on March 31st, and additional housing and development topics can be addressed at that time. But again, just kind of wanted to open the floor for your commission to have the platform on mixed-use development, and any additional thoughts, questions, or recommendations to the council that you'd like to follow, and we will transcribe.
Commissioner Holden. Vice Chair Swift.
Yeah, so I think the 2 specific things that I was interested in here were really a quantitative percentage of commercial use in the project, right? As if we're going to call it a mixed use, is it a tiny little 100-square-foot bodega on the corner and all the rest residential, or is the intent to have it truly a walkable, street-fronting, commercial, pedestrian-centric use? And I think while that's been assumed, it seems like there's not any quantitative values in the code to drive this is what we expect from the mixed use in terms of the percentage of the ground floor, for example, that is commercial. And I guess I would like to see something like that, recommended where we really do say if you're going to have a commercial residential, commercial industrial residential, whatever it is, that we really do try to maintain that commercial footprint, because one, that was kind of the point of the zone, but the other one is that's a big revenue generator for the city, in terms of sales tax, especially if it's, let's see, what do the studies say, a garments or a pharmacy apparently are big incomes. But if we lose that space, right, we take a residential or dominate a commercial zone with residential, we have lost commercial space forever, right? That money-generating, foot traffic-centric commercial space is gone. And so it would be nice to have clarification as to what we really expect from these commercial residential mixed use. The other one, and this came up the last time I asked the question about if you do a subdivision, so you've got a lot, and you, prior to developing it, you subdivide it, and now you've got a lot with 30 APNs on the lot. Is there expectation that all of the APNs are mixed use, since that's what we're talking about, or some percentage of the APNs must be mixed use? Again, what's that expectation?
Yeah, so a mixed-use project is considered a mix of residential and commercial uses on the same site. So key here, again, mixed-use project, all on the same site. So mixed-use development is not confined to horizontal or vertical, as residential uses are an allowed use within a larger mixed-use project. Residential components on those common interest lots are considered an allowable use under our and consistent with our development code. So yes, how that previous project was presented is consistent with our code. Others that have already been approved consistent with the code. So that mixed use project, so long as it's all on that same site and there's that common interest that ties it together, it's an allowable subdivision as well as use of the site.
So the language that you use, you say residential is an allowable use in a commercial zone.
A residential component's an allowable use within a mixed-use project.
Okay.
And the site itself, is that common interest that all of those individual APNs, regardless of whether it's a
I get that.
condo or
Piece.
townhome.
I'm going
So-
someplace else with this. Is that a residential component requires a use permit, is an allowable use in a mixed-use development.
The mixed-use project requires the use
project.
permit.
Okay. And that choice of language to me says that it is the secondary use of that piece of property, right? It's a commercial, we'll just use commercial industrial as the example. So we have a commercial industrial piece of property zoned. Residential mixed use is an allowable use with a use permit. How do we define in the code to clearly communicate that while the residential is allowed, it's the secondary focus of that zoning, right? Visitor serving, commercial industrial, whatever it is, that it's the secondary focus, allowed, encouraged, but secondary to the business use of the underlying zone.
Yeah, I think where we get in, so you can make that recommendation to the council that that percentage as part of a mixed-use project, that the secondary or accessory use is residential to commercial. Where you get into trouble is that any residential project, again, protected under Housing Accountability Act or density bonus, can supersede that. So I want to be careful how we advise you on that, but I think if that's something that you want to recommend to the council as part of their considerations for the upcoming March 31st meeting, I think that'd be appropriate.
So could a housing project go in a commercial business open with no commercial or business component to it?
No, because it's not considered a mixed-use project. So I think where we're disconnected is that you're focused on the term residential, and this is a mixed-use project proposed in a zone that allows for a mixed-use project,
Okay.
mix of residential, commercial.
With no limits on what the ratio of the
Correct.
commercial to the residential is?
Correct,
And
correct.
what- I
But
think
if you want to add that prescriptive nature to it, staff's happy to do that with council's direction. And again, look to our legal advice to ensure that we're not now inconsistent with state law, state housing law specifically.
Okay. I mean, I think that's really where my interest lies, is that if you just give up all the commercial space, you've lost a lot of sales tax revenue, potentially, and exchanged it for property tax revenue, which is, predictable, but maybe lesser to the city.
Yeah, and again, if we do that, we are limiting density in certain zones where it's already been established and certified in our housing element. That could lead us down the path of decertification of our housing element if we choose to limit that density.
But you know what the
Based on that
limit is,
percentage.
right? I mean, you can go back and calculate for any given piece of property in one of those zones where a
Well,
mixed
if
use
you
might go
provide
in.
for a maximum allowed density, let's say of 20 units per acre as part of a mixed-use project, and you establish and the council establishes and adopts, and ultimately is certified by the Coastal Commission, certifies that, that now mixed use is defined as a third residential and 2/3 commercial. Let's just say you've effectively taken that 20 units per acre and limited it, which, as part of our housing element certification, we identified where that additional density could go to fulfill our RHNA and fulfill our housing goals and state's response to our housing crisis. We're now potentially in an area where I would advise us to proceed cautiously. But again, not necessarily a discussion for here. That's a discussion for March 31st, but just something to keep in mind. Any limitation on density, intensity, we've got to figure out a place for it to go, and it's a hard balance.
So I thought we went up, right? We went
We
up.
did.
We went up
We did,
to increase the density on
And
those.
now you want to limit that.
No, I'm saying, I'm just asking the question, is in the calculation of going up,
Yes.
did we consider a certain volume of commercial space on the ground floor with that up, that we can still have commercial space? Because that was what I had remembered from the 2021 conversations, was a lot of debate about the ground floor commercial and needing another floor in order to meet the density requirements. But I never heard the actual square footage of the ground floor commercial that would drive that.
Could try to look into our records and see if there's any minutes or anything as part of those public hearings, but yeah, we'll look into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because effectively, we went up a floor, which bought us more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that calculation was tied back to an assumed ground floor commercial.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
I think,
Go
ahead.
Sorry.
go ahead.
What or who designates visitor serving?
So visitor serving is one of our zoning designations as well as one of our land use categories. So it's adopted through our council as part of our land use element and as part of our zoning code.
So a mixed-use property could or may not be visitor serving. Is that right? Or is it all visitor serving?
So allowable land uses are listed in Chapter 2 of our development code, and a mixed-use project is considered an allowable use within the visitor serving district and designation.
It's a district.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You brought up a good point.
I mean, that's another restriction.
Well, I
seems.
think the debate about what is visitor serving, this was discussed pretty extensively with the Rockaway project, is
Right.
that as a second floor
Jim.
gym meet the definition of our code's visitor serving. And what that told me is that there's still some ambiguity in our code in terms of what's expected in visitor serving that may need to be tuned up. Okay.
I think my question about like where the commercial piece we don't have a requirement that it has to be on the ground floor.
No.
At this point. I feel like you're talking about wanting to make sure that we optimize ground
Sorry,
floor.
Chairman, I just want to clarify. We do have a requirement that if your ground floor is going to be, it can't be residential. So if you have ground floor, it's going to be commercial with residential in the rear or above. There's nothing that says that you can't have commercial on the top floor. So I just wanted to clarify that
Yeah,
for you.
that's interesting because in the land use element, I'm looking at LU 2.5. Notwithstanding the preference for ground floor commercial and retail businesses in mixed-use development, housing for residents with special needs should be allowed in all or part of a mixed-use development, so long as such development is consistent with objective zoning standards.
Yes, so let's say someone wanted to propose an accessible unit on the ground floor, it would need to be behind the street-facing
Okay, like
commercial
what they did
use.
with Palladium. where they have ground floor units that are behind the street facing?
Yes, as facing the parking lot.
Okay, so it's not the entire ground floor, but the street facing part of it is what we're talking about? Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, also along West Grand, the same standard doesn't exist for 4th Street. South or North 4th, that's why the units exist along the street facing side.
Okay. I don't think I have any further questions on that piece. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, let's continue. Oh, wait.
I was waiting for the next one.
He's primed.
Okay, so last topic. So this was a last-minute addition from your commission, and it was included as, again, part of kind of this emerging and evolving topic and some misunderstandings from the community. So the community members have contacted us, have spoken at public comment and during public agenda meetings that they've asked kind of how these developments are being evaluated in accordance with the Coastal Act and how they're able to move, how projects are able to move forward as they'll ultimately block views to the beach. And so I just kind of wanted to help your commission understand our certified local coastal program, most recently certified by the Coastal Commission unanimously, occurred on December 11th of 2025. Our certified LCP is the regulatory framework for development in the coastal zone. So the certified LCP, not the Coastal Act, serves as the primary standard against which a development project's evaluated by a local agency. So our development projects, and staff specifically, reviews for consistency with the LCP. Is the project cited and designed to minimize adverse impacts to scenic resources, specifically designated scenic resources, community character, and visual compatibility? And what we address and what we look at is we utilize, for example, the objective design standards checklists, as well as our development code, to address factors such as massing, scale, bulk, articulation, setbacks, roof form, and materials consistent with those adopted standards. And I tie this back to the fact that our local coastal program has been certified by the California Coastal Commission. What they found is that if a project conforms to those development standards, they presume it to satisfy our policies relating to visual resources and visual impacts. So again, certification of a city's LCP signifies a commission's determination that the LCP is in conformance with and adequate to carry out the requirements of the Coastal Act, meaning compliance with the LCP constitutes compliance with the Coastal Act. And the Coastal Commission's found that a project that conforms to our regulations is presumed to satisfy our visual resource policies. Again, a mouthful, I apologize, but I'm available for any questions. Again, this was added kind of last minute, just to provide clarification. If you have any additional thoughts or questions, we're available and are happy to transcribe anything that you'd like communicated to the council.
Do you have any questions, Commissioner Holden? Vice Chair Swift?
We've still got 3 minutes. I'm going to try to say what you said in a LCP for Dummies way. The LCP is essentially the local policy that has been approved by the Coastal Commission so that everything that affects the coastal zone, coastal area, is considered conforming if it conforms to our local policies. It doesn't have to keep going back to the Coastal Commission. And that's actually a good thing from a development perspective. It means because the Coastal Commission doesn't get to weigh in on every single project, they've said, verily, you guys have a local coastal plan that meets our requirements. I think the surrounding question is the policy. The policies, local policies that may exceed or otherwise deviate from other coastal cities, how much flexibility do you have locally to protect a broader collection of views, for example? If you defined public views as being a view that impacts more than an X number of, square feet or X number of neighborhoods or X number of linear feet of coastal facing properties, could that be done locally in the local coastal plan, and then the coastal commission would probably approve that, and it would become the local policy.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just speak generally to the process. So if your commission's advice to the council is we should consider policies to designate areas along any public street as a designated scenic resource. First, we would need authorization from the City Council to pursue that LCP amendment. That LCP amendment would need to be justified. We would have to qualify why it is designated a scenic resource, consistent with our local coastal program policies, as well as those that identify the eligibility criteria within the Coastal Act. So we would seek that authorization from council. We would conduct public outreach, and we would coordinate very closely with the Coastal Commission, and then identify those areas. Those would then get certified, adopted locally by the council after public outreach, public meetings at your commission, and then ultimately back to council for local adoption, and then forwarded to the Coastal Commission for their certification of an LCP amendment to add a policy to designate certain areas as scenic or protected visual resource areas. We don't have that direction right now. And as I mentioned in the staff report, a public street on its own doesn't necessarily constitute a designated scenic resource. It has to be qualified. Our coordination and collaboration, and I don't know if you want to speak further to this, but our collaboration with Coastal Commission is that the properties just east of all of our railroad enjoy the privilege of the view shed to the ocean, but it doesn't necessarily constitute anything that would be otherwise designated as a sensitive resource. But that's also not their decision to make, it's the communities. And if our council wants to pursue that, we're happy to pursue an LCP amendment that's specific to designating those visual resource areas.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to how do you quantify the loss of a view to a community, right? If you have one house that gets its view blocked, we already have talked at length about residential views are not protected. And yet
private views
private
protected,
residential views
yes.
are not protected. But if you just took let's take a worst case scenario. Somebody puts up a 8-story building right along the railroad tracks that is completely connected all the way down with no view through, and you block every view from Grover Beach to the west to the horizon for the whole community. Would that be considered acceptable under the current code? And it seems to me
Yes.
like it is, right?
Yes, because our Coastal Commission has certified our LCP amendments, which I want to be very specific. Our LCP amendments are technically our development code amendments. So they certified our amendments both in 2022 as well as in 2025, consistent with the LCP and ultimately consistent with the Coastal Act. So that certification, distracting. That certification ultimately fell to them to authorize us to be able to move forward with it. So yes, I'm not saying that Grover Beach would ever allow an 8-story building, but if you have a zone that allows for a particular height, and a developer comes or a home builder comes and wants to build to that height, and it's an allowed height within the zone, they can do that. And the Coastal Commission has certified our code amendments to be consistent with the LCP and the Coastal Act. So it doesn't mean that we still don't address visual impacts and look at what the impact might be on compatibility and consistency with the neighborhood. That's far from the truth. We still look at what that impact might be, but because our code is fairly limited and our policies are fairly limited on kind of more objective standards by which we would measure that impact, there's a little bit more wiggle room. But they found it consistent, and so we continue to practice and implement as such.
Yeah, and so again, this is sort of like the 22 changes in West Grand Avenue, is that, if you start seeing the real impact of the changes to the community, and you say, well, that's not quite what I wanted, right? We didn't expect those consequences from these changes. How do you loop that around faster so that while we're figuring out what the right tweaks are, we don't steal the entire community's, view, whatever it is. View is a good example, but
Well, and again, those policies only apply to those in the coastal zone, right? So those policies wouldn't apply to folks that are not in the coastal zone. They still have, that prescriptive and that intrinsic value of the view that they see towards the shoreline, but those coastal policies only apply to properties within the coastal zone. So
the LCP only applies in the coastal zone, and views are only discussed in the LCP? No.
No,
Okay.
it's citywide. I'm just saying that the privilege that people are afforded to be able to see towards the shoreline, those policies, those coastal policies for protecting view sheds right now only exist in our LCP. And so just ensuring that it's understood that there's a split between how those policies apply to properties in the coastal zone versus they are not applicable to policies in properties that are not in the coastal zone.
Understood. Yeah, and I think I'm asking a more general question of anywhere in the city, right? If a project is blocking a visual resource from the city, in or out of the coastal zone, right? I have a sliver view of the ocean, and someone blocks my view. That's just the way it is, right?
Right.
But if there's a large project that blocks an entire neighborhood,
But again, that neighborhood is collectively private property. There's no right to that view.
But Grover
So-
Beach is collectively private property. So how much of Grover Beach do you have to block before it's considered a community or a public resource versus a couple of private views?
Yeah, larger
what's the
question,
scale?
larger
What's the
question
scale?
than I can answer right now.
Okay.
And again, we don't have this as part of our work program. I can tell you individual projects that come forward, we address them consistent with our policies. We don't have designated scenic resources here. We have visual resource areas, but no protected scenic vistas or view sheds. So if somebody builds to what's allowed in terms of floor area ratio, in terms of height, in terms of setbacks, et cetera, they have an allowed right to do that. And Coastal Commission has said, based on their review of our development code, which ultimately feeds into our LCP, that our development code is consistent with our LCP, which presumes consistency with Coastal Act. So until we're given direction to change that, and I described the process earlier, that's where we're at.
But as a city policy, that could be done. It could be the policy of the city to go back to protecting private views on certain
Yeah,
corridors.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one last question about the process of designating.
Is your mic on? Sorry.
Thank you. You talked about the process of that would need to be gone through to designate a view shed, but that process is only for land that's within that coastal area, right? So there's not.
Those policies would only apply to coastal zone. Correct.
Okay. So it's not a matter of someone decided, I like the Grover Henge effect that you get twice a year when you're standing on Newport Avenue.
Well, for example,
And so
if there was a rezone in the inland area of one of our residential neighborhoods, if we went from R1 to R3 for some reason, if a whole city block went from R1 to R3 and a developer came in, home builder came in and built up, and we allowed them to go to, let's say, 40 feet, you couldn't use a coastal policy to say, you can't build that, it's inconsistent with coastal policy XYZ, I can't see the ocean now. It's inland. Those policies don't apply. So that's the distinction.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the coastal zone visual resources topic from the commission? Seeing none there. We are in a public hearing, and if there are members of the public who'd like to speak to what we've talked about here, let me get back to my script. I thought it was a public comment.
Right, so it's not a public hearing, but you will call for public comment.
Sorry, not a public hearing, a public comment. I correct myself. So Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on any of the items of item 3? Please come forward.
Debbie Peterson, 160 South 3rd, living in the coastal zone. One of the things I'd like to point out is that there are caveats on all of these terrifying, threatening rules that if we don't build way high, we are going to be in terrible trouble. And one of the caveats is I think almost all of them apply to affordable housing. And the development that's going on in Grover Beach is not affordable housing. We've way exceeded our RHNA numbers, but we've exceeded it not with affordable housing, unfortunately, but with unaffordable housing for most people. So I wanted to bring that forward to make that point. Also, I do want to thank you, Chairman, for giving us kind of an oversight of some of the public comment that was heard, the hearings, and all of you for discussing all of these things, because as a planning commission, you can make recommendations to the council, and it's important because you're hearing things from a different perspective than they are, so you have a lot that you can help them with to understand what is going on in the city. I would say, I would like to ask you also to look at solar protection, and perhaps reporting on solar protection, because it impacts people's, when we have tall buildings, it impacts the neighbor's ability to have solar themselves on those buildings. And it also impacts the ability for them to have simple sunlight in their yards, and sometimes also impacts them, the ability for them to have sun coming through their windows or privacy. And I know you addressed that one. Although you think, in the interest of time, maybe we shouldn't be talking about the single stairway thing, but I'm going to ask you, and I appreciate our community development director for speaking to this, and the fire department in a limited way speaking to this. I want you, on behalf of the people of Grover Beach, to make a stand for their health and safety and say, no, what about the handicapped people, the children, the seniors? Do we just say to get more units, it's okay if we have more deaths or more injuries? So I'm hoping you'll speak for us in Grover on that. So I'd encourage you not to table that question, but at least to give it some time. I'd also find it really helpful to have the term transit stop and how it relates to bus stops and train stations, and where it now legally applies, because we've been told for ages, oh, we have to do this, the world's going to fall apart if we don't. And I think there have been some changes on all of that. So it'd be really helpful for all of us to understand what the current law is and what we really have to do and what we don't have to do. And is it only related to affordable housing? Because that's not what we're building right now. Objective procedures, great, but we have to follow them. And I think in some of our recent developments, we have not. I have more, but I'll have to write to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm glad we have a Kelvin Kovjuk, 272 Beckett, 1 block behind Front Street, in the coastal zone. I was riding my bike on Highway 1 today, and it said it's an historical trail. And there's a sign that says that. And I can't remember exactly what explorer used the trail. So it's not a scenic resource, but it's an historical trail. So I don't know if that is important for blocking that. But one of the things I wanted to say last time I was up here, which seems like years ago, that Highway 1 should be a scenic highway in Grover Beach. It's our gateway to the ocean, and people drive through here, and I see no difference from that than Pismo. And areas of Pismo, Highway 1, are designated as scenic highways. That's a game changer for future generations. So if you could somehow work on that, that would be very positive. Also, I heard that you're allowed 4 amendments a year. I don't know how many we've used up so far, but I think we could certainly do an amendment on the Front Street project to lower the heights to a reasonable level. I don't think the city would be sued, especially from what I hear, if you offer another project of the same density, again, as former Mayor Debbie Peterson mentioned, there's no affordable housing on the Front Street project. It's got a name, by the way. It's called Solstice, which means it's getting to be more of a reality when you give a building project a name. So as far as Solstice is concerned, if the levels were dropped, and again, when I say it's 40 feet, it's really 50, 55 feet when you add up all the stairways. There's no elevators. Sorry, disabled people, you're not going to be able to get up the stairs because there's no elevators. So, I mean, the whole project is upper end. So if, I understand there's like 10 more projects planned, you could easily move it to somewhere else to make up for the few houses you're going to lose by dropping 7 feet. What else? Again, it's not going to solve the housing problem because a lot of those people buying those things are second homes. I talk to them every day. I'm here for a few months, and that's it. They're not sending their kids to our schools. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room who wanted to speak to anything on item 3? And is there anyone on the phone?
No, there's not.
All right. I will close public comment for item 3. My commissioners, we have had a lot of discussion more directed at staff. We do have an opportunity to talk to each other in this moment. Do you feel that we have sufficiently discussed the items of item 3? Commissioner Holden? Vice Chair Swift?
For tonight, yes. I think on the 31st, that's where the real conversation is going to happen. And the question is, are we generally in agreement or disagreement as a commission on how we're going to recommend things to the council on the 31st? I mean, I think we certainly have some differences of opinions, but I do think on most of the topics we're probably looking for the same conclusion. Sort of.
Yeah, I think I would like to understand if there is a kind of switcheroo kind of way to change the height of what we've already agreed to. I don't believe there is, and put that onto another parcel. So if we were,
I mean, I think it is possible, but it would make most sense to do it during a housing element update because that's when you're considering all of the parcels and all of the densities in all of the city, as opposed to, having to make those recalculations kind of based on one particular project or zone or it makes, and I'll let Community Development Director Martin speak to this, but from a legal perspective, it's possible, but you do have to consider where will you replace the density, and it makes most sense to do that when you're considering the entire city in a housing element.
right, and the additional staff time for a one-off project.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and maybe the one thing that I didn't say this on the view area, but it will probably come up on the 31st because I'll be thinking about it again, is that as long as we're not in the business of protecting views, we should not be in the business of providing them either. And one way to solve this conundrum of stealing the views from the community to give them to a developer is to eliminate rooftop decks on these new developments. You can have a balcony, you can see the ocean from your balcony, but we're not going to give you a rooftop deck, and just eliminate them from those developments. Private rooftop decks, I should say. That's the qualifier. Private rooftop decks. So chew on that one a little bit. Public rooftop decks are great. Private, not so much. That's it.
Any other discussion on item 3? Okay, so do we have any recommendations for staff to take to council besides, that are general, besides, I guess, I will reiterate my thinking that if we can identify a way to roll a lot of this discussion into our housing element process. So I think we'll have further discussion on the 31st, probably. Right.
Correct. I think the last three bullets are going to be discussed as part of our March 31st joint meeting. The other four, probably not on the council's radars as part of the discussion, but any that you want me to specifically, point out to the council, now would be the time to let us know. And I've got the draft report up on my screen right now. I'll just add it in under Planning Commission recommendations.
So the last bullet, then, I think it's beyond coastal zone, right? It's, as you pointed out, some of these developments may block large visual resources outside of the coastal zone, and so maybe it's a more general topic for that meeting.
If your commission wants us to forward that along, yes.
Should that be forwarded along as a more general view discussion, not just coastal zone?
I don't know.
No.
No.
I guess I feel like we have enough.
Yeah.
There's
It's going to be a long
a lot
meeting.
of action that process would be a multi-year kind of discussion. This city has been incorporated for over 60 years. At no point has there been a discussion yet about protecting the view sheds outside the coastal zone, right?
There was. Prior to 22, the private views were protected. And it was the changes in 22 that...
I think I'm talking about like the street views, the public views.
I'm talking about the general view conversation. When does it become a public view? How many private views do you have to block before it would be considered a public view? Even if it's a street corridor point, like Newport, good example.
Mm-hmm.
It's a missing definition in the code.
At this moment, I would not be in favor of making that a priority.
So are we going to have a vote on whether that's included in the agenda for the 31st? That we want to have a general views, expand that last one to be more of a general conversation about views and not just coastal zone visual resources?
Isn't the state telling us that we can't? Doesn't the state tell us how to deal with that?
Does the state tell us how we can write code to protect or not protect views? To enable or not enable views?
I think it's going to require additional research by staff. Again, I fall to my understanding and area of expertise, which is if any policy or standard eliminates or limits density as certified by our housing element, we have to replace it someplace else.
Okay.
So I think just moving forward with that in mind, and then I will work with our city attorney's office to better define whether or not view shed protections can be incorporated as part of our housing element update, as part of our discussion on March 31st, as part of a sooner update to our LCP and or just to our development code in general and land use element.
Is the last bullet sufficiently general that we can have general view and visual resource conversations on the 31st?
The purpose of the 31st is to discuss housing and development in Grover Beach. So if one of your concerns as a commissioner as part of that joint session is to, propose that that be discussed. I think your commission, you as a commissioner can bring that up as part of that discussion. I think what I need from your commission this evening is what is the consensus of your commission, the majority of you this evening, that you'd like me to include as part of the staff report to the council of things that they would like, that you would like for them to focus that policy discussion on.
Everything we talked about on bullets, the last 3 bullets. I don't know how else to say it.
Is this something where as individuals we could communicate things to you? Or does it need to be something that we're all voting on, like a motion and a?
So this is a little bit of a unicorn of an item. It's not something that I've ever done before. Sorry, distracting. What I would tell you is that the purpose of this evening, as we discussed it previously, was to provide you the platform to come to a consensus on the topics that came up in 2025 to forward to the council. And say, hey, these are the things that we're seeing and hearing out in the community, and with applications that are being submitted. And we would like for your council to consider changes and/or improvements, or maybe a development code standard's completely obsolete. But the purpose was, here are your topics. Let's discuss them further and come to a consensus of which ones you'd like us to present to the council.
And just to clarify, consensus doesn't require a vote. It just requires that 2 out of 3 of you agree affirmatively in a way that staff understands that you would like this to move forward to the city council. And that does have to happen today in a public meeting, because if you provide that information later, it's essentially conducting a meeting outside of the public, and it would be a Brown Act violation.
Okay.
And I think I have direction.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Let's go down the list. So we could go in reverse. At this point, I think Ann and I have expressed we don't feel that there is something to move forward with on the coastal zone visual resources. You have a difference of.
I think there is.
That's inappropriate.
I think there is. I think there's enough questions in the community about views, and specifically views in the coastal zone, that it deserves a conversation.
It's beyond our pay grade.
No, it's not. It's a city code, right? The city council can recommend a revision to the code to further define how views are or are not protected.
As long as the Coastal Commission approves.
Right. It still has to be an approved LCP, so it would be a revision that would go back to the Coastal Commission for approval, but it starts with a local policy or a proposal, and then it goes to the Coastal Commission for approval and incorporation into our LCP. So it's within the scope of the City Council to change how we protect or not protect views in the city.
You may find we are just 2 people out of what should be a 5-person commission. So I would encourage you to bring that up at the joint meeting, and you may find council members who are interested in prioritizing that.
I'm just, can I bring it up? That's the question, is if it doesn't make the agenda for that joint meeting, can it be brought up?
Apologies, I do not set the agenda, so I am going to be presenting just a paragraph to the council as part of the staff report that just identifies that we had this discussion, and of those emerging topics from 2025 relating to housing and development, here are the policies that the commission would like for you to ensure that you're thinking about and possibly advance further policy development on. Does that make sense?
And I think they should be considering views, and as long as it's an open topic at the 31st to bring back up, I'm fine with that, even if it's not a recommendation out of 2 to 1 here to do that. As long as it's available on the agenda, I'll bring it up.
I don't have any knowledge of what's limited to that discussion and what's not. It's very broad. It's housing and development within Grover Beach. Okay. So
Yeah, and the agenda's not developed yet, so it's a little difficult to answer that question when we don't know exactly how the agenda language will be worded. And then also the mayor will be leading the meeting, so it'd also be at her discretion how to seek input from the planning commissioners and the other city council members.
And she watches this meeting, so she would know that this was a debate topic and whether she wants to include it in the agenda or not. We'll leave it up to them.
Okay. Shall we move on to the other items? Mixed-use development, do we have anything that we are in agreement on that topic that we want to include in the staff report?
So it sounds like you could go back and look at the minutes from those other meetings maybe and see if there was some quantitative analysis of the increased height versus the available commercial space on the ground floor. I just don't remember that conversation that clearly, but I know it was had. So
I'm not opposed to trying to suss out the math on the, minimum and maximum allowed to us under the current, if we can figure out under the current housing element. If we can get some more numbers around what that looks like. What do you think? This would be sort of some better understanding around, in the housing element that we have, was there an assumption of a certain amount of commercial for the envelopes that we enabled?
Both Mr. Bell and I are still in contact with our consultants from that time. We can reach out and ask if there's any recollection of that. I can't promise numbers prior to March 31st based on our existing workload, but I will do my best to get something. I think just the broader brush of the conversation we held this evening surrounding mixed-use development, that message around that split between the two and better prescribing what it should be as part of a code standard is my understanding of where we're wanting to recommend to the council to advise staff to pursue policy changes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. With objective design standards and Grover Beach character on that topic, is there any item that we want to include in the staff report? Let me go back to my notes that I brought.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no obvious solution, but there are some tweaks that could be done to the code to maybe influence that. And so, I think beyond saying that there should be another look at the code to see if there are things that can be added or tweaked slightly to influence the character, but that we're not going to define a character. I think that would be a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I think saying we shall be would be a mistake. That's I think.
I'd prefer to invite the creativity. Say, okay, here's your envelope.
Yeah, as long as the creativity doesn't always produce the same box, that's awesome. Engineers like things to be.
I mean, my home is boxy. All the parcels are boxy. This building is boxy.
Yeah.
Beautiful masonry, though. Okay, let's continue.
So that one we said was put it in there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that we want.
E-bike seems like a police department problem.
Yeah, I don't think we need to forward anything on from the e-bike discussion. Do you, Commissioner Holden? Anything on the parking regulations for ADUs or these sort of unique land uses that aren't prescribed in our code?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a problem yet. It could be at some point. It's probably not an urgent problem.
How many people do you know that actually park their car in their garage?
What's a garage?
I do. My community, I think there were 34 units. There's 34 single car garages. I think 2 of them have cars in them. So when parking gets tight, maybe they'll clear out their garage. Okay, so the height limits on accessory dwelling units,
If I could help with that
yeah.
one, it was more a clarification item because a lot of questions had come up. There's really no local discretion or authority with that one.
that was my impression as well.
Yeah, I think the solutions were the best that we could hope for under the circumstances.
And with the single stairwell reform, I just want to clarify, we haven't tabled the conversation, but because of AB 130, we are limited in what we can propose as part of the recent 2025 code cycle. We definitely want to continue in our efforts to ensure that we're making the right decisions for our community and involving Five Cities Fire as well as our CalBO partners and our building official. Mr. Sadowski identified a mid-year update that something like that could be possible. To be quite honest, I don't think we have the staff resources and or the direction from council to pursue it. But beginning in 2031, it could be something that we pursue with the next code cycle, unless the state fire marshal comes out with their opinion. And in order to, again, further state housing legislation, we have to incorporate something. But we will communicate that as early as we can to both your commission as well as to the council and what direction we need to take.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I hope we're all in agreement that I don't think we move forward with making any changes until we have more information from the state study. There's many places on the planet that have very safe single stairwell multi-unit homes. So I think it can be done here, but let's see what the state of California figures out. So I don't think we need to forward that on for just, Are we in agreement on that?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on item 3, commissioners? Thank you for a robust discussion. Thank you to the community for being here. We have gotten through that. All right. Seeing no further business items, we'll move on to commissioner comments. Commissioner Holden, do you have any other comments for the evening?
I do not.
Vice Chair Swift?
I do not.
I do not. So I will call now on the Community Development Director for her report.
Thank you. I just have 2 items to touch on. So former Commissioner Maya Hoffman tendered her resignation just about a month ago now. And so she made the city clerk and the deputy city clerk and myself aware that she would be resigning. So that is why she is not present this evening. She's been greatly appreciated and she will be missed. Hopefully we will see her in the community and or at future planning commission or city council public comments. But she has unfortunately tendered her resignation, which leaves an opening. And I also wanted to make you aware that both Commissioner Holden as well as Commissioner Halverson's term limit is set to expire in May of this year. And so our city management team will be opening the application period for replacements for those commissioners and interviews in front of the council. The application period will open in March, and interviews will occur at a future date to be determined. I don't have that at this point in time right now, but application period will open in March. So if you know of anyone, or if those listening at home or watching at home, or those in the audience know of anybody that might be interested, those seats will be available for applications.
So with former Commissioner Hoffman's resignation, does that mean that our roll call was correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that piece.
Correct.
Although-
And until such time that her seat is filled, which will occur at the same time that Commissioner Holden and Commissioner Halverson either decide to reapply or not, that recruitment process will all occur together at the same time.
So we'll be short a commissioner for a couple of months.
Correct.
Okay.
That concludes my comments, and I appreciate tonight's discussion. This was It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write this report, and for Kyle and I to kind of collaborate on how we wanted to present it. I hope that we can improve upon it next year. I think there's a couple of bumps, some misunderstandings that we needed to clarify offline. But I think it actually was a lot of fun. So I look forward to this year as well, and just the emerging topics that we have, and having something very similar towards the end of next year and/or the beginning of 2027.
Great.
Yeah.
Any questions for Community Development Director Martin? Commissioner Holden? No. Vice Chair Swift?
No.
I'm not going to ask you about the lodge. We'll hear about it next time.
I can tell you about the lodge. Their building permit application was resubmitted to the state. It's currently under review by the state. So it's still an active permit under review by the Office of State Fire Marshal.
That's the longest purgatory.
40 some odd years. So I guess one other update that I can offer you in terms of development, 950 El Camino Real has seen a couple of setbacks. It sounds like they're yes,
Okay.
yeah, right next to the Pismo Oxford Suites. It's that one that's right there. Just they're struggling to keep contractors on site, so that one's going to be extended for another 5 to 6 months. So I think it's just the current climate, and we continue to work closely with their general contractors. Our building inspector and building official are out there when they need us. But just an update for you that it looks like that's getting pushed back a little bit.
They finished the brick on the front of the building. It looks very nice.
It looks much better. I'm glad they added the brick.
Me too.
I like brick.
That's sobering.
Yes.
I have no other questions. So I believe that brings us to an adjournment. With no further business before this commission, I adjourn this meeting at 8:40. Thank you, everyone.